Hello and welcome to the Warcraft Academy guide to Spoils of Pandaria Heroic. For this guide I'll assume you already know how the fight works on normal. If you don't, click at the top to view our normal mode guide. You'll want to use 2 tanks and 5 healers for this fight on 25 man and 2 tanks and 2 healers for 10 man. This fight has the tightest DPS check probably of any fight in Siege of Orgrimmar, at least if you don't have really awesome gear. You need to know exactly what every mob does, how much you can take at once, and how to clear the rooms very efficiently. Just like normal, you'll split your raid into 2 groups. You'll want a balanced mix of single target and AoE DPS in each group. Now, the main new mechanic on Heroic is that every time one room kills any mob, an unstable spark spawns in the other room. Unstable sparks begin a 10-second cast when they spawn, and if they're not killed before the cast is finished, they'll explode for about 500,000 damage. To handle these, you need quick DPS swapping to kill them before they explode. Since the rate they spawn at is determined by how fast the other group is at killing mobs, you may end up getting several sparks spawning in quick succession, which can wipe you if you're not quick to swap. The order that you handle the mobs is also different from on normal. The large mobs take up a lot of time on Heroic and do a colossal amount of raid damage whilst they're active, so it's not really practical to take more than one. This means you'll need to take more mediums and small mobs to compensate. In each room you'll be taking one large, all the mediums and all of the smalls. Now what I'm going to do is give you some general tips about how to pace yourself in each room, and then I'll go over a suggested route to take through each room. First of all, you'll always want to start by taking the 2 panda chests in each room. Start with one chest, DPS the mob to around 40%, and then open the second chest. The point here is not to overwhelm yourself with abilities you can't handle, but never to get to the point where you have nothing to DPS. The pandas are extremely important on Heroic, and the type of buffs you can get have a massive impact on how easy the fight is for you. And unfortunately it's completely random what buffs you get each try. The most important buff by far is the healer buff, and the reason for this is it allows your healers to completely obliterate the unstable sparks. When your healers have the healer buff, their heals can spawn a tidal wave that travels forwards in the direction the healer is facing, doing massive damage to enemies and massive healing to allies. By having your healers position themselves intelligently, they can face towards sparks and mobs as they spawn to do massive damage and healing at once. Waves will go off every 7 to 10 seconds as they do their normal healing, so simply heal away and face towards sparks, but try to position yourself so you hit several enemies at once with the wave, and if you can, also hit your allies as well by standing at the back. The reason this is so important is it allows your healers to almost single-handedly deal with the unstable sparks that spawn. You'll still want range, keeping an eye out to finish them off or to deal with them when the healers miss with their wave, but it frees up a ton of DPS time which can be used to clear the room a lot faster. As for the tank and healer buffs, it doesn't really matter which one you get. The raid DPS gain overall is pretty similar. For the pandas themselves, you'll want to make sure you're properly spread out. The damage from the Brewmaster's Keg Toss is splash damage and will kill your raiders if you stack up too much. In addition, you can get some nasty combos like Breath of Fire at the same time as Gusting Crane Kick, which will kill people if they get hit by the breath. It's critically important to use personal cooldowns to survive this if you're in danger of being hit. The breath is always aimed at the tank, so melee have plenty of time to dodge it. So as I said, get the first panda to 40%, release the second, kill the first and then kill the second. Remember to click the buffs after they appear. Once the first panda is dead, you'll open the large mob and 2 smalls. Now as I said, the large mobs deal a ton of raid damage, so you will need to rotate any raid and healing cooldowns you have whilst they're alive. You'll be opening small mobs 2 or 3 at a time whilst the big one is up, and focusing them down whilst the big one is active. After that, you'll be clearing through all remaining small and medium chests at a speed that's both safe and efficient. As a general rule, you can handle 4 or 5 small chests, or 2 mediums and 2 smalls, or a mix of the 2 at any given point, but it heavily depends on what type of mobs you get. In the Manded room, your highest priority is Kunchongs from the small chests. Whenever one of these spawns, all DPS focuses it immediately until it's dead. If you have a Kunchong up, that's your cue to not go too crazy on opening boxes. The other small mobs, Bombardiers and Warcallers, can be painful, but don't need to be directly focused. Warcallers must have their enrage dispelled by a rogue or hunter extremely quickly after they use it, otherwise your tank will need to kite it or use a cooldown. Bombardiers will be doing constant splash damage to your raiders and spawning the gusting bomb wind lines, which can be very hard to see. There's a small animation on your character if they spawn directly on you, so try to look out for it. You will die very quickly if you stand in them. For medium chests, you can either get Amber Priests or Wind Wielders, both of which will be using their dispellable buff on themselves and all mobs around them. Again, these must be dispelled. An offensive dispel with no cooldown is best, and don't let players complain about the mana cost because dispelling is much more important. Wind Wielders are the highest priority medium mob and a second in priority overall, after Kunchongs. If you have, say, a Wind Wielder and an Amber Priest up, feel free to cleave both of course, but focus your damage on the Wind Wielder and finish it off completely. The tornadoes that the Wind Wielders create deal a lot of damage and move in a circle, but the circle gets larger over time, so as a tank, try to keep moving away from these so they don't directly intercept your melee. When you're dealing with your initial large mob, you'll need to place your bombs in an area of the room that won't give you trouble. If you're a class with an immunity, you can just soak the debuff away from other people and not place bombs on the ground, which will be helpful for space concerns. Otherwise, you should just try to throw them into an area you've already cleared, not somewhere you'll need to move later. Those are your only real concerns in the Manded room. As long as you get Dispel sorted and ensure to focus Kunchongs and then Wind Wielders, and focus on dodging wind lines, placing bombs correctly and avoiding tornadoes and puddles, that's all there is to this room. The Mogu room is quite a lot tighter in terms of DPS requirements, and should be the room you use Bloodlust in each time just as you're opening your large crate. When you're handling the large mob, you should have an absolute maximum of 2 small mobs active as well. He'll be constantly spawning statues and casting a high raid damage spell. You will need to use raid cooldowns during the casts of these if you have them, and you need to kill the statues as they spawn to keep them under control. This is where you should be using all major defensive and personal cooldowns. Burial urns are absolute highest priority at all times due to the amount of extra mobs they spawn if left alone. Every DPS should be focusing these whilst they're up. The only exception would be if you have an anima golem on say 10% health and then you open a burial urn. It would be smarter to quickly finish off the golem before going on the urn. The other 2 small mobs are really no issue whatsoever. The stone Mogu guys have an interruptible cast which really has to be interrupted or dispelled, and the Quillen are very weak and will die just to cleaves. For medium chests, anima golems are highest priority, right behind burial urns. Now the thing with anima golems is that they have a soft enrage. They spawn the same red beams from normal, and one player must stand in each beam or you'll wipe. However, if they stay alive too long, they'll start to spawn more red beams each time, which increases the chances that you won't be able to have a player in each one. In addition, they'll be spawning red pools on the ground which do a ton of healing when the mobs stand in them, so the tanks need to be moving the golems out of them very quickly, and your DPS really has to focus these down. Don't sit there AoEing when these are up, actually focus down priority targets and you'll have a much easier time. The other type of medium mobs are really no threat at all as long as their forbidden magic is interrupted and their offensive debuff is dispelled. There is generally a lot less that can kill you in the Mogu room, but it's far more important to focus priority targets. You'll waste a huge amount of time if you leave an anima golem up too long and let it heal a ton. Generally, in that room, if you get an anima golem, that's your cue not to open any more medium chests. And if you get a burial urn, go easy on small chests until it's dead. Keep this room under control but still efficient. Once your anima golem is on 20%, feel free to open another chest, but finish killing the low health one before you swap DPS. So let's just talk about an example clear order for each group. This is just the way that we clear it, feel free to adjust it for your group. Starting with the initial Manded group, open the first panda chest and then open the second panda chest when it's at 40%. When the second one gets to 40%, we open the large chest and the 2 smalls adjacent to it. Keep dots on the big guy and focus the small ones, especially if there's a Kunchong. When the smalls are dead, move over to the right and continue opening smalls so that you always have 2 or 3 alive. Stop when you get a Kunchong and focus it down. Once you've cleared all the smalls in this corner, your big guy should be dead or very close to death. Finish him off completely. Open the 2 mediums here, prioritizing a Wind Wielder if you get one, and move them when tornadoes spawn. Make sure you dispel properly. Once one of them is almost dead, your tank can move to the corner here and start opening smalls. Again, if you get a Kunchong, focus it down. Notice that we're always killing off low health mobs so we don't get overwhelmed. Open the 2 medium chests in this corner when any Kunchongs are dealt with and you don't have too many other mobs up, again focusing any Wind Wielders. You want to get out of this corner quickly once tornadoes spawn and these mediums are up, although you probably won't be killing things quite as fast as this. From here on, just clear along this line towards the end, continuing to focus any priority mobs. In the Mogu room, take the 2 pandas and then the large just as before. Use Bloodlust here and open 2 smalls. Focus down any burial urns you get and keep statues under control as you focus the large one. Open the 2 smalls here when the large guy is almost dead and then the remaining chests in the corner. You'll probably get an anima golem here, so fully kill it before you open any more mediums. When any anima golems are dead, start to clear through the smalls in large groups, stopping to focus burial urns as they appear. Clear to the corner, focusing any urns and anima golems you might get, and then move across to the other side and start clearing along the wall. Avoid the large crate, obviously, and follow standard rules of priority. You never want to have 2 anima golems up at once unless one is imminently about to die, and you shouldn't ever leave burial urns alive for more than a few seconds. For the group that starts in the Mogu room, start with the 2 pandas and then the large mob like so, taking small mobs 2 at a time and tanking the large mob in the centre. Now from here, you're basically just moving clockwise around the room, taking smalls and medium chests as you go. However, sometimes you'll have to skip a section and come back to it. For example, here there are 2 medium chests. If you open the first and you get an anima golem like so, you should not open the second. Instead, go to the nearest smalls and open several of those instead. Once the anima golem is almost dead, you can head back to open the skipped mediums. If the first is not an anima golem, you can safely open both at once. Simply proceed around the room following this strategy. In the Manded room, take the 2 pandas and then the big guy like so, along with 2 smalls in the corner. Then simply proceed clockwise around the room, taking up 2 mediums at once and 3 or 4 smalls. Anytime you get a Kunjong, slow down opening smalls until it's dealt with, and focus down Wind Wielders as your primary target whilst dispelling Enrages, Residues, and Rage of the Empress buffs. In the last 40 seconds or so of the final room on each side, it should be very obvious if you're going to make it in time. If you're far ahead of the timer, consider sending a DPS over to help with the other group if they're behind. On the other hand, if it doesn't look like you're going to make it, you may just have to open any remaining chests and hope you can AoE it down in time. Only do this if you have to though. It's a good idea to separate your raid into different channels on your voice comm server, since you won't need to communicate with the other group anyway, and it should make it easier to discuss what mobs you're taking and when, as well as calling out when sparks spawn. Generally, you'll want one person in both groups keeping an eye on sparks at all times. If you have the healer buff, that person should still put some damage into them to help the healers out in case they aren't able to kill it. If there is no healer buff, you'll want 1 or 2 people going fully into them every time they spawn. Destruction Warlocks are very good at killing sparks quickly. Once you've cleared your room, you'll need to click the lever before time runs out to fully finish it. So to sum up, have a balanced mix of AoE and single target in each group. Kill unstable sparks as they spawn, or use the healer buff to kill them if you have it. Take the panda mobs first and then 1 large mob, then clear through all smalls and mediums in the room in a clockwise fashion. In the Mogu room, prioritize burial urns and anima golems, and never have more than 1 anima golem up at once. In the Manded room, prioritize Kunchongs and Wind Wielders. Ensure Rage of the Empress, Residue, and Enrage are all dispelled immediately when they appear. Avoid the tornadoes and try not to tank the mobs in the path of the tornadoes. Avoid the pheromone pools, and don't stand in the lines. When you're killing the pandas, ensure you're spread out if you have the Brewmaster up, and use a personal cooldown if you're in melee when he does Breath of Fire. Thank you very much for watching this guide, and if you have any comments or suggestions, please post them in the comment section below, and remember to visit warcraftacademy.com for all of our other guides for Siege of Orgrimmar. If you like this guide, please do subscribe, it really helps me out a lot, I really appreciate it. Thank you, and catch you soon.